CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen. The Eurozone returns to growth in January for the first time in 7 months. But it's a rather bleaker picture for the UK. Our other headlines, another mass shooting in California as 7 people are killed near San Francisco, 2 days after an attack during Lunar New Year celebrations. Poland asks Berlin for permission to send its Leopard tanks to Ukraine a day after Germany's foreign minister said they would not stand in the way. And a string of top Ukrainian officials quit their posts amid accusations of corruption within the government. The Eurozone could escape a recession, but the outlook for the UK is not so positive. This is according to the latest economic data. Britain's economy is contracting at its sharpest rate in 2 years, raising recession fears. In contrast, the Eurozone returned to growth in January for the first time since June. Well, flash PMI, which estimates manufacturing activity, rose to 50.2 in the Eurozone, beating expectations, a figure higher than 50, of course, indicating growth. But the figures for the UK weaker than expected, flash PMI sliding to 47.8 from 49 in December. Industrial disputes, higher interest rates, weaker consumer demand, all contributing to the slowdown. Well, let's get more on this with Christian Schulz, Deputy Chief European Economist at Citi. Good to see you. Welcome back to the show. Let's just start with the Eurozone, if we might. Does this data mean the Eurozone might escape recession?
It makes it increasingly likely, yes. The PMIs are one of the better indicators of where growth is right now, and at these levels the economy normally does not shrink. Of course, there's always a bit of uncertainty around these indicators, and of course, if you look at the data from the various countries, for instance, Italy had a pretty bad quarter in Q4. It looks like industrial production down. So there's always a risk that we get a very slight decline, but certainly not a deep recession and most likely stagnation, I'd say.
The UK has suffered this sharp January contraction in activity in contrast to the Eurozone's apparent revival in business activity in the same period. What's going on here then?
Well, both the Eurozone and the UK are benefiting, of course, from the fact that the terms of trade shock, this massive energy crisis triggered by the war in Ukraine, is unwinding. The euro area is also benefiting from the fact that the Chinese economy is reopening. Europe exports a lot more to China than the UK or indeed the US. But the UK has some idiosyncratic factors it's dealing with at the moment. We have a much bigger tightening of financial conditions, so a much bigger increase in interest rates and borrowing costs of the economy than in the euro area so far. The Bank of England's been more aggressive. We had that almost financial crisis in September around the mini budget, which has led to a turnaround in fiscal policy in the UK, which hasn't happened in the euro area so far. But maybe the UK is also a bit of a leading indicator because it came out of the pandemic a bit earlier and vigorously than the euro area. It's now suffering sort of, if you like, the hangover of that party, and maybe that's only to come in the euro area. So we're a bit uncertain as to what degree the UK might just be a leading indicator for the euro area. But right now it looks bad for the UK indeed.
Christian, just give us a bit of an international perspective on this. I mean, how does Europe and the UK compare to the rest of the world?
Well, if you just look at the PMIs, Europe actually looks pretty good. I think only Japan at the moment is in expansion territory. Economies like China, the US, the UK, of course, all in contraction territory. But the reality is, of course, again, that the PMIs are one good indicator, but you have to look at a broader set of indicators. The US economy has had a more complete recovery from the pandemic. Consumption still looks strong, labor market looks strong, wage growth is strong. So there's still some power in it, some fuel in the tank of the US recovery, I think. China is only now sort of coming out of the pandemic, so we're quite optimistic that the Chinese economy will recover more strongly later this year, even though right now it may not look quite as strong. And Japan will benefit from the Chinese recovery as well. So I think it's a very fluid picture. The snapshot looks good for Europe, but it's going to have to hang on to the tigers that pull the global economy in order to keep that positive momentum, that relief that we feel at the moment going.
Christian, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on the programme, for your expertise. Christian Schulz, the Deputy Chief European Economist at Citi. The UK government borrowed more last month than in any other December since the monthly records began 30 years ago. Borrowing hit nearly $34 billion, driven by government support for energy customers and soaring debt interest linked to rising inflation. That figure nearly 3 times higher than the previous December and significantly higher than predicted. Microsoft's founder, Bill Gates, is investing in an Australian startup company which aims to reduce methane emissions from cows. The company, Ruminate, is developing a seaweed-based feed which it's claimed will lead to the animals burping less frequently. Studies show methane emitted by livestock is a contributor towards climate change. A company owned by the British royal family is suing Twitter over its unpaid rent at its London headquarters. The Crown Estate, which oversees a property portfolio belonging to King Charles, has filed a claim in the High Court relating to office space in London. Twitter has declined to comment. Elon Musk has accused Saudi financiers of backtracking on a deal to take Tesla private 4 years ago. Musk is facing claims in a US federal court that he defrauded investors by making a series of tweets in which he claimed he had funding secured to buy up to Tesla stock at $420 per share. A jury must decide now whether Musk artificially inflated Tesla's share price, and if so, by how much. For many Hungarians, putting food on the table is a struggle despite the government's food price cap on some essential food items. This comes as the country records the highest food inflation in the European Union, with prices rising at one of the fastest rates in the world. Our correspondent in Budapest, Pablo Gutierrez, reports.
A year ago, Janos Baradi says his wages from working as a janitor were enough to provide of his wife and 5 children. But that has changed as the price of food items has risen.
My wife has a heart condition. She can't work. I need to provide for her and my children. It's a tough situation.
Year-on-year food inflation in Hungary is 44%, the sharpest increase in the EU. According to the World Bank, Hungary is one of the top 10 countries with the highest food prices. The rising food prices are not only making it hard for some families to buy food, but grocery stores, from small corner shops to big international companies, are struggling to stay profitable. According to the Hungarian Trade Association, about 3,000 small grocery stores have gone out of business due to the sharp increase in food inflation this year. Another factor is the government's food price cap imposed at the start of the Ukraine conflict. Retailers are not compensated for the cap on 6 food staples, including flour, sugar, eggs, and chicken. To offset those losses, retailers have been forced to raise the prices on items that are not capped.
If the food price cap ended today, the market would correct itself quickly and the prices of non-capped food items would start to come down.
Big box grocery stores like CBA, Hungary's second largest supermarket chain, and international retailer Tesco say Budapest's price cap policy is bad for business. Both have voiced concerns that if it continues, they could be forced to cut staff numbers.
I have worked in this industry for 30 years and have never seen anything like this. Food prices continue to rise very fast, with no end in sight.
Hungary's government says the food price cap is necessary because the country is facing an extraordinary situation. Prime Minister Viktor Orban insists that if the cap remains in place, it could bring down inflation to single digits sometime later this year. Meanwhile, Baradi worries about having enough money to make it to the end of the month. He says he's often shocked by food prices at the grocery store and worries that soon he will not have enough to feed his family.
Prices have doubled or even tripled. For example, 1 kilogram of cheese used to be $4 a year ago. Now it's 12. Bread prices went up by the same amount.
These are challenging times in Hungary. It is the Baradi family and many like them who are feeling it the most. Pablo Gutierrez, CGTN, Budapest.
California is reeling from its second mass shooting in as many days. A 67-year-old farmhand has been arrested after reportedly killing 7 of his colleagues at 2 locations south of San Francisco. The tragedy came less than 48 hours after a different gunman killed 11 people at a dance studio near Los Angeles before turning the gun on himself. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Dan Williams in Monterey Park, where Sunday's mass shooting took place. Dan, what more do we know about the gunman at Half Moon Bay and his possible motive?
Yeah, we now know, so the gunman is a 67-year-old. His name is Chun-Li Zhao. He acted alone, according to police, and he also, we understand, drove himself to the police station following the shooting. There was fairly dramatic footage of his arrest there as he was taken into custody at that police station. Now, we also understand a semi-automatic pistol was recovered from the scene, and we understand that he is cooperating with police. Now, according to Dave Pine, who's the president of the San Mateo Board of Supervisors, he says that he was a disgruntled worker, but we also understand that the statement just released by the owners of the farm saying that they have no knowledge of the gunman or indeed his motives. Now, there were 4 victims at the mushroom farm. There are further 3 victims at a local trucking business as well, while 1 person is also remains in a critical condition in hospital. Now, incredibly, just hours after that, there was a further mass shooting, this time in Oakland, California, where there were 7 people injured and a further person was killed there. So it really, once again, following the shooting here as well, really emphasizes just the real front of mind nature now of gun control here, not just in California, but across the US.
Dan, what's the latest you have on Sunday's shooting in which 11 people died in Monterey?
Yeah, we're starting to get a slightly better picture, if you like, of the gunman himself, Hu Can Tran. His motive still unknown officially, although there's obviously a lot of speculation following the attack on Saturday night here. Now, police say he twice went to a local police station where he made various allegations against his family in terms of theft, in terms of fraud, and also in terms of poisoning as well. So that's in the build-up to the traumatic events that happened here. And we also know, of course, that he was a regular at this dance hall as well. But we're also getting a greater picture as well as to the kind of scene, the kind of carnage that took place here at this dance hall. 42 bullet casings were found inside the dance hall itself, while a further person, one of the victims, was shot outside of this dance hall. Now, the community itself, they're still coming to terms with the events of Saturday night, as you can imagine. People grief-stricken, people very much unsure as to how this could have impacted their community. But there are also growing voices, concerns around gun violence as well. And a little earlier, I caught up with Henry Lowe. Now, he's the mayor of Monterey Park here.
I mean, this is now the 33rd 33rd mass shooting, and it's just unbelievable to me. And I know here in California we have one of the strictest gun control legislation, but yet here we are again, another mass shooting, and so something has to be done. I mean, we need to stop the violence.
Well, California has some of the strictest gun laws in the U.S., but this shooting, as well as this other one now at Half Moon Bay, once again really emphasizing the need for some kind of action. And Joe Biden, the U.S. president, also coming out following that latest shooting, saying that he expects a bill to be presented on his desk from Congress where they're banning assault weapons as well. So he's calling for an assault weapon ban from Congress.
Dan, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dan Williams in the United States. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern bids an emotional farewell on her last day as Prime Minister.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. The Eurozone returns to growth in January for the first time in 7 months, but it's a rather bleaker picture for the UK. Our other headlines: another mass shooting in California as 7 people are killed near San Francisco 2 days after the attack during Lunar New Year celebrations. And just a quick reminder, CGTN is available to watch for free on all of the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online at Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview. Poland has made an official request to Germany to allow it to send Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Berlin is required to approve any export of the German-made tank, even when they're sent from other countries. However, Germany's new defence minister says a decision will be made soon. Boris Pistorius has been meeting the head of NATO, who wants allies to speed up advanced weapons deliveries to Ukraine. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Trent Murray, who's in Berlin for us. Trent, Germany seemingly not shifting its position on tanks, at least for now.
Yeah, that's right, Jamie. The German government are facing 2 very important decisions right now. Number one, whether to send some of their own Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. We'll come back to that one in a moment. Number 2, perhaps more pressingly, this request from Poland to send some of theirs. As you said, because that weapon is made here in Germany, well, Berlin still gets a veto over whether other countries can hand them over to other nations. And so we understand today the Polish government officially put in the paperwork. The Defence Ministry here says it will assess that application with the urgency that is required. But on that first point, as you said, the German government is hesitating somewhat, saying it wants to do some stockpiling, some inventory checks before making a decision on whether to send some of their own stocks of those Leopard 2 tanks. But something which may influence their decision is just some breaking news that we are hearing in the last hour. The Wall Street Journal and Reuters are both reporting that the Biden administration is leaning towards sending a significant number of Abrams M1 tanks. Now, they are really the workhorse of the American army, and they are an American-made tank. They say an announcement on those deliveries could come as early as this week. Now, I have to stress, this is only 2 outlets reporting it, and we haven't been able to independently verify that. But it would seem tonight something is clearly happening in the US and German capital on the question of tanks, and Ukraine could be on the cusp of going from having no NATO standard modern Western-made tanks to potentially having a whole lot from Europe and the US. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, but it shows that clearly that intelligence about Russia potentially stepping up offensives in the spring is starting to change the thinking in some of the European capitals this evening.
And NATO seemingly confident that a solution through this will be found soon.
Yeah, that's right. Jens Stoltenberg visiting the German capital today, the head of NATO using that word precisely. A solution should be found. In many ways, actually, if you look at that news out of the US in the past hour, it starts to make sense what Jens Stoltenberg was saying today, really being very strong in saying that heavy weaponry is now needed in Ukraine to help them repel Russian offensives. Let's have a listen to what he told reporters.
The only way to lasting peace is to make it clear to Putin that he will not win on the battlefield. Therefore, we must provide heavier and more advanced systems so that Ukrainian forces are able to repel the Russian forces, not only to survive, but to win, take back territory and prevail as a sovereign, independent state in Europe.
Trent, can we just put to one side for a moment the supply of tanks to Ukraine and just talk about the makeup of NATO, because Finland suggesting it could move ahead with its NATO membership bid without Sweden, and that's significant, isn't it?
It is very significant because when they initially indicated they wanted to join, the two said they'd like to join together. But of course, they need to get the agreement from all the other NATO members. And Turkey has got some real issues with Swedish authorities and their lack of enforcement around a particular group called the PKK. They are branded as terrorist organisations in Europe and Turkey. To make effectively the situation worse, we saw a burning of the Quran in Stockholm over the weekend outside of the Turkish embassy. That has inflamed tensions even more. The Finns are suggesting today, given what is happening there, that they may just have to go it alone with their application. We will just have to wait and see whether that's indeed something they will do.
Trent, thank you for that. Our correspondent Trent Murray in Berlin. Several senior Ukrainian officials have resigned amid accusations of corruption. This follows the arrest of a deputy minister who's accused of taking bribes. A top presidential aide to President Zelensky has quit, along with a string of deputies and a senior prosecutor. Ukraine's leader has announced a ban on government officials leaving the country unless on state business. Volodymyr Zelensky says there'll be a zero tolerance on corruption.
Ignoring the war is a luxury no one can afford. Fierce fighting continues in the main operational areas, particularly in Donbass. Enemy shelling and assaults are going on around the clock, but the battle for Donbass continues. The battle for the south continues. We see what forces Russia is amassing and we know how to respond.
The World Health Organization is reportedly considering whether to advise families to reassess their use of cough syrups for children while questions over safety are resolved. The WHO says an investigation is underway into possible connections between 6 manufacturers in India and Indonesia and the deaths of more than 300 children. The WHO is said to want more information on raw materials used after the medicines were found to contain unacceptable levels of toxins. The former Lebanese Prime Minister Hassan Diab has been charged in connection with the 2020 Beirut port explosion that killed 220 people. Diab, along with other former ministers and senior officials, faces charges of homicide with probable intent. The inquiry into the explosion unexpectedly resumed on Monday after it was paralysed for more than a year by political infighting and legal challenges. At least 3 people have died, while dozens are feared trapped following the collapse of a 5-storey apartment block in India. Rescue workers are searching through the rubble in a bid to try to find survivors in the city of Lucknow. Jacinda Ardern is spending her final day as New Zealand Prime Minister after her sudden resignation last week. She's being replaced by Chris Hipkins, who will be sworn in on Wednesday. In her farewell speech, Ardern thanked the public for what she called their empathy and kindness, but added that she was ready to be a sister and mother again.
I want you to know that I leave with a greater love and affection for Aotearoa New Zealand and its people than when I started. And I didn't think that was possible. So my final words are this. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for the greatest privilege of my life.
They are 2 of the world's most celebrated cuisines, French and Chinese. Now, leading figures from the culinary worlds of both countries have come together in Paris to celebrate the Lunar New Year. CGTN Siobhan McCall reports.
France and China are 2 of the planet's gastronomic giants. At the start of the Chinese New Year of the Rabbit, the UNESCO headquarters in the French capital hosted a dinner. The Chinese ambassador toasted bilateral ties and using food as a bridge to connect cultures.
We think that creating a link of friendship through food is the best way to bring the French and Chinese people even closer.
Porcelain first emerged during the Shang dynasty in China more than 3,000 years ago. The global success of the fine traditions, both from China and more recently from France, was another cultural link being celebrated.
We will never forget that porcelain was first created in China several thousand years ago. In Limoges, we started our tradition in the 18th century with the ingenuity of French decorative arts, with our style. We have a different perspective and a vision of porcelain, but naturally, we respect and admire everything that's been done and is being done in China.
The world's most respected award for the best restaurants is arguably France's Michelin Guide, which hands out stars to the best kitchens. The Joël Robuchon Group has 29 Michelin stars among its restaurants. Its boss, Sophie Robuchon, is the daughter of the French chef Joël Robuchon, and she was a guest at the event. Some of the late chef's most famous recipes were served at the dinner, including this caviar jelly, one of 2 starters on the menu, and braised beef, which was one of the main courses.
It's true with the magic of our 2 cuisines that allows us to have discussions, talk together to better understand each other. We can also discover cultures which often can inspire others, and that's what makes this gastronomic moment more special, that we can be here with joy and conviviality.
The international stage can sometimes be the setting for political disagreements, but hosting a dinner can be less confrontational and a more delicious way of engaging with other countries. And the French chefs decided that the best way to celebrate the New Year of the Rabbit was to ensure that there were no bunnies on the menu. Siobhan McCall, CGTN.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching. More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. See you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.